for his own property, which included 3 large parcels of about 330 acres. And the request is to change this from rural residential agricultural to heavy commercial industrial on the land use plan map. And on the screen, you can see the parcels that were requested for change. Just to orient you a bit, this major road here is 264 East. You can see the intersection with Shepherd Mill Road here just to the north. As far as our current zoning, as most of you are aware, there's a large recycling center already in place right at the intersection of 264 East and Shepherd Mill. Large area already zoned as general industrial. Again, the properties in question tonight for the land use plan change are bounded in yellow here. As far as the land use plan map is shown, you can see we've got already, I'll say, some misalignments between our zoning map and our land use plan map. We've got areas outside what is currently shown as general industrial that actually encroach into certain other areas. With this particular request for change, we are also amending it to include additional areas. You can see some areas here between the commercial and the areas that's proposed. We feel like that would be in line to also be changed at the current time. So we'll show those maps in a minute, but what we have up first is our definition for rural residential agricultural. And again, you've seen this definition time and again as far as what's allowed here, everything from residential to agricultural to forestry. There's the subject property one more time, going over to heavy commercial / industrial, and this particular area is designated for heavy commercial or industrial uses as the name indicates. Finally, after review of this, not only at the staff level but with the planning board, when we're dealing with our land use plan, as you can tell here, typically we have more generally shaped patterns within our land use plan map. We were a little concerned with the gerrymandering of sorts with the properties that were included, and that was basically a function of the way they're shaped for the, in the tax parcel maps. So what we've done is generalize those lines, and you can see here fairly smooth shaped around, also including the area that bounds 264 in this general vicinity, just adjacent to the area that's already designated heavy commercial or industrial. With that, both the staff and the planning board, this is an addition of about 50 acres more than what Mr. Whitehurst had originally requested, and also shows on here those parcels that would be affected by this change on the land use plan map. The planning board also reviewed this and also endorsed this generalized map at their October meeting. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we have sent notices to all those affected, including those affected by the new boundary, and to date have not received any questions or comments about that. So we're ready for a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. I now declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this change in the comprehensive land use plan?
My name is James Burgess, and I'm just here representing EJE Recycling, and we were just in favor of it in an aspect that, you know, eventually we're going to expand and there's going to be future additions, and this seems to make you know, the most sense out of what we've got and what's there, and we just would like to see this move forward for progress. Okay. I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here who would like to speak against this proposal? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. What is your pleasure?
Who would approve?
I second
Motion
it.
and a second. Any further discussion? Let's vote. The next one, next public hearing is one for E.R. Lewis Construction, a rezoning request, and Mr. Rhodes is going to present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These two next public hearings are paired together. First one up is a legislative action dealing with a rezoning. The second one will be a quasi-judicial action that's required for a conditional use permit. It, of course, deals with the same piece of property. This request is for E.R. Lewis Construction on State and House Road. A request to actually downzone from rural residential to rural agricultural conditional district, and this is specifically for the operation of a sand mine. On the screen, you can see the property in question. It's bounded to the north and east by Martin Luther King Boulevard, the bypass. Also, just across State and House is an existing and active mining operation by Mr. Lewis that was rezoned several years ago. This particular request, again, is being handled first for the rezoning aspect, and it is to downzone to the RA district for the operation of a sand mine. As part of the process tonight, too, we also have a site-specific plan for the development of this site. This is necessary for the conditional use permit, but also will give you a good indication about how the development standards would apply. First up, there's a 100-foot setback from the property lines for any mining operation, so you can see the active area for the mine will be well inside the current boundary. That's the second or interior lot line or red line on the map. Also required within that 100-foot buffer is the screening berms, and that is a 6-foot berm around the entire perimeter. As far as the land use in that, or our land use plan map in this area, the node or the intersection of Martin Luther King Boulevard and NC 33 is a commercial area. Other areas, you can see there are some floodplain areas in the dark green, but generally it's in rural residential. In this particular area, though, suburban residential is the designation for it. It will actually allow for a lot of different types of uses in that area. And as far as the existing land uses, the purple area here, it is very close to the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. Just outside of that is the active sand mine. There is also a church nearby and some scattered residential uses. And here's your zoning map. You can see again all in rural residential except for the one lot or one parcel that has been rezoned a few years ago for the current mining operation. And this conditional zoning district would allow this one particular use and one particular use only. And given the proximity to the location of an existing sand mine and its rural nature, we believe it does meet the requirements here for the rezoning. The planning board also reviewed this at their October meeting and also agreed that it is reasonable and within the public interest and is consistent with the land use plan. So we're recommending approval of this rezoning. Ready for the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I now declare the public hearing open. Is anyone here who would like to speak in favor? Please come forward and give your name and your address, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brian Fagundes. I'm with ARC Consulting Group here in Greenville, and I'm here tonight on behalf of E.R. Lewis Construction Company. Obviously, we're in favor of this request, and as Mr. Rhodes explained, again, it is a conditional use zone that supports just the use and operation of the sand pit. So if you guys have any questions, be glad to answer them. Otherwise, I think he did a great job trying to explain it to you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to come and speak in favor of? Is there anyone who would like to come and speak against this proposal? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. What is your pleasure?
We approved request.
I second
Motion,
it.
second, let's vote. Any discussion? Let's vote. Okay, thank you. The next one is a conditional use permit for this same property, and Mr. Rhodes is going to present that.
And again, this will be a quasi-judicial action, so in turn, there are specific requirements that have to be met, the first of which is the swearing in of the witnesses by the clerk.
Okay, are there any witnesses? Anyone want to speak on this issue? Please come forward.
Again, you're familiar with this property already, as we've just shown you the maps. Again, right at 25 acres of property that was just rezoned. Now the conditional use permit to actually allow the use, the land use of a sand mine. As you're aware, when we go through these sand mine operations, there are some restrictions or provisions within our ordinance for these. First up, 100-foot use separation. We showed that on the plan. Hours of operation only apply when there's blasting involved, and typically that is not the case with sand mining. Screening is required, and of course, a mining permit is also required from the state. With any of these conditional use permits, we also go through the criteria that's listed in the ordinance. In this case, will this particular use endanger the public health or safety? Our comments are that it will not, given the provisions within our ordinance of setbacks and also screening. Will it injure the value of the adjoining or abutting property? We feel like it will not. Again, across the street from here is an active sand mine already. Is it in harmony with the area? We believe that it is, given the setbacks again and the active mining operation that's across the road. Is it in harmony with the other plans that have been officially adopted? We believe that it is. So 2 motions tonight, Mr. Chairman. Number 1, to acknowledge that the conditional use permit application is complete and complies with all the applicable zoning requirements. And secondly, to approve it, the conditional use permit per the development standards. There are a couple of other things, must meet the stormwater requirements, and also NCDOT will be requiring driveway permits here on State and House Road. So we're ready for the public hearing for this.
Okay, thank you. I now declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone who would like to come forward and speak in favor of, and you have already been sworn in?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Again, Brian Fagundes. 3 things that Mr. Rhodes mentioned that in order for us to operate the sand pit, we have to do. One is we have to acquire a state-approved mining permit, which after we pass through tonight, hopefully will be set to make that application. Secondly, DOT driveway permits, and then thirdly, the stormwater ordinance compliance. Without any of those, we don't operate, so we will be obtaining all of those as part of our continuing permitting efforts. Other than that, if you guys have any questions, be glad to answer them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of? Anyone who would like to speak against? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. What is your pleasure?
Move we approve 1 and
Second.
2 as 2 motions.
I second it.
I have a
All 3
motion and a
steps,
second.
though.
Yes,
All
okay.
3 steps.
Any questions? Let's vote. Thank you. Now we have one final public hearing, and this is on Mrs. Williams' residential daycare facility, a conditional use permit. Mr. Rhodes is going to present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is a conditional use permit, so in turn, we will be following quasi-judicial procedures. With that, we will be establishing facts tonight, and those wishing to speak will be under oath. So we'll ask again, anyone wishing to speak to come forward to be sworn in by the clerk.
Okay, anyone wishing to speak on this subject, please come forward. I have 3 people that signed up. Okay.
Place your left hand on the Bible.
But you got one more cup.
Place your left hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
The property in question tonight for the conditional use permit for residential daycare is located on Old River Road. If you're familiar with that area, it's just within the subdivision called Crystal Acres, which is just about a mile south of NC 222. The particular area here is designated as suburban residential in our land use plan. Just a reminder, this is a residential daycare, and the definition for that is a child care facility located in a residence where at any one time, more than 2 children, but less than 9 receive child care. So again, in a home that's currently used as a residence. In this application, it is requested that this particular use have operating hours between 6 a.m. and 12 midnight. Property shown here on the screen, again, if you're familiar with this area, it is just adjacent to a church there on Old River Road. Just in front of that, the drive for the church is just beside it. And that in turn shows on the existing land use map, you can see basically in a sea of residential area shown in the tan color. The blue color here is for institutional uses, and that being the church. There are development standards for this particular type of use also, security fencing, the location, also the hours of operation, which we've already mentioned. The criteria will also go through as well in consideration for this conditional use permit. First up, will it materially endanger the public health or safety? Staff comments are we believe that it will not. It will actually blend with the existing uses around there. Will it injure the value of the adjoining or abutting property? We believe that it will not damage the adjacent properties. Is it in harmony with the area? We believe that it is. And finally, is it in conformance with other plans that have been adopted? And we believe that to be the case. So tonight, our requested motion is number 1, to acknowledge that the permit application is complete and also approve it subject to those conditions that we mentioned, specifically the hours of operation from 6 a.m. to 12 midnight. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. I now declare the public hearing open. Is anyone here wishing to speak in favor of this? Please come forward. Give your name and your address, please.
My name is Shamitris Williams. The address is 2532 Florida Harris Road. I have been doing home daycare for about 5 years in the residence that I'm at now. I've never had an issue with my neighbors. I'm always in compliance. I never go over the amount of kids that I'm supposed to keep, and my neighbors have never had a complaint about me running my home daycare.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of? Okay, is anyone here who would like to speak against this proposal? Please come forward. Give your name and address.
My name is Peter Lead. I live at 3822 Old River Road, which is right next door to the property. Crystal Acres, we're under a covenant. In the covenant, there is no business allowed in the area. I have dogs. My yard is fenced. My concern is kids putting their hands through the fence. We had neighbors before who had kids who were ruly, and they teased and harassed my dogs. And they're at a point now where they don't like nobody near their fence, and they were never like that before. My concern is the safety of kids sticking their hands through my fence. I have signs posted, no trespassing, beware dogs, but kids are kids. And my concerns is the safety of kids. Our covenant strictly states that there is no business without the written approval of Kenneth Lloyd, who is the developer of Crystal Acres.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak against? Okay, now I had 2 other people that had signed up, Mr. Gardner, okay, and Gianna? Janine, okay, so y'all are okay. Okay, you have, if there's no one else who would like to speak on this issue, anyone else who would like to speak on this issue? If not, I declare the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this really for James. He speaks to the covenants.
Right.
Have you read the covenants, and what do they actually say?
I have not read the covenants.
Would that not be important?
Well, the thing here is, as far as our zoning is concerned, and this particular use, the residence is the primary use. You could consider this a business. In our minds, it's not a business. It's a residential, it's an accessory type use for the primary use being a residence. So, it could be considered that way, and especially if it would require Kenneth Lloyd, being the developer, his signature first. That would be his determination, not necessarily the county's at this point. But we have not checked with Mr. Lloyd on this. We do have permission from the owner. The owner has said okay with this particular use going in,
The owner of that property.
owner of that property.
Mr. McGlaughlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, I understand that she would provide a 6-foot fence and in protection of anyone coming in and out of it.
She
for
is
the children.
required also to install a 6-foot fence before it opens.
And so I think that in terms of the rest of the neighbors in that area, what type?
Tonight is the first time we've heard any opposition, and we've had the signs posted, and also the notices have been sent out in advance of this public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. James?
All right, this fence, is there any likelihood about the kids getting out or anything and going to his property?
The requirement is a 6-foot fence. So most kids, and, you know, any kid possibly could get out of the fence, but a 6-foot high fence versus a 3 or 4 foot fence, I would say the chances are slim to none.
And how many kids will you be having? I know you said, but repeat that.
8.
8,
That's if I have 8 at a time.
right. Their ages are what?
Ages are 6 weeks to 12 years old.
The older ones come after school.
Yes, they're only
Okay.
there for approximately 2 hours.
Right. Thank you.
And you've never had any complaints pertaining to the daycare when you had it there
No, and
for
my
5 years?
fence is already separate. It's not like it's an adjoining fence to where the neighbors would be. It would be off separated from everybody else.
How far will your fence be from this gentleman's,
I would say about 15 feet.
so pretty close there?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Carlson?
should we not respect the covenants? I think before we make a ruling, we ought to at least have the covenants looked at. The fact that it generates potentially, well, it will generate cash flow, that turns it into a business in my mind. If the covenants strictly prohibit that, then, you know, that's gonna pretty much shape my opinion.
Oh.
Because I think covenants are important and ought to be respected.
Okay. Mr. Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mr. Colson about the covenants, with the exception that I don't think that considering the covenants is under our purview of authority, that we can only consider what's in our ordinance, and they meet what's in our ordinance. The covenants are a civilly litigated item, a contract that would have to be taken up in different courts, and I don't think we can recognize them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
James?
she's been there that long. How many kids do you have now?
5.
It's going to certainly be a hardship on those people that she has been keeping their kids, and she's been keeping them for 3 to 5 years, something such as that. And we have always approved the daycare centers because it helps the parents and so forth out. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I move that it be approved.
I second that, Mr.
I have
Chairman.
a motion and a second. Mr. McLaughlin, did you have anything additional?
No, I just
Okay.
wanted to say that we normally approve these type of daycare in areas like this, and so I don't see any exception now. So I concur with Commissioner James.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like, I understand that the covenants need to be, I'm gonna say almost litigated to be validated. But the thing is let's say somebody wanted to litigate it now. Whether it falls under our purview or not, the mere fact, I'll bet you one of the questions would be surrounding what are the county commissioners allow you to do this? And the answer is going to be yes. And I think the court of law would look at that and say, well, okay, that means that covenants can be overruled. To me, covenants are important. And the fact is that in the past, we haven't ever had anybody come before us, to my knowledge, and bring up covenants as an issue. Many times it goes without anybody speaking against, of which time then I think that collectively we usually vote unanimously to approve it.
Commissioner James?
Do you have a covenant with you, sir? Yes, I do. Well, I think we need to let our attorney look at it right past, if you will, please. Because that certainly will override probably everything that we're doing. But otherwise, my motion is going to stand. I've been in that area, though, Mr. Chairman, forever, and I've never heard of a covenant before, but I'm not doubting it one bit.
Again, I don't think the matter of the covenant is before us. I think that we have to affirm or not our ordinance, and I feel like this would almost rise to the level of our attorney giving legal advice outside of her authority to do so to private citizens, where she's the attorney for the board and the county. The issue in front of us is whether or not the application is complete and whether or not the home is suitable based on the ordinance, and that the decision that we make is to affirm that or to decline that, not for us to rule in any way on the covenants. Now, I think covenants are very important. I do, but I don't think we have that authority, and I don't think a court could grant any kind of notice to what a Board of Commissioners decides on a zoning law that doesn't have anything to do with a private covenant.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask Mr. James if he would repeat the statement about the fact that, I mean, like a business, like there won't be people driving up in cars and parking and going inside and purchasing things. And I know that that's something we have talked about in the past, where these residential babysitting facilities or school facilities, and I mean, the cars will be coming up, putting the children out and leaving. It's not like coming in and purchasing something or whatever.
We do have different classifications in our zoning ordinance for daycares. One is a commercial type daycare, and that, of course, would be one that, where more than certainly 8 children could be held or housed during the day. Also has some other characteristics as far as access, handicap access and things of that sort. So in this case, the primary use again would be the residence. Secondarily, it would be used as a daycare.
The primary use is the home of the person who is using her residence as a daycare for up to 9 children.
It is a requirement actually that someone live in the home. It is
Right.
not just set aside for daycare use only.
Okay.
I'd like to
Didn't I-
offer a
did-
substitute motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let me ask one question. May I?
Sure.
James, did I understand her to say she has 5 kids there now?
Yeah.
I have 5, because where I'm at now, where I was
She's-
looking, that's where I'm in a different residence.
She's not there in this home yet.
Oh, okay,
she's
very good.
moving.
Okay, thank you. Substitute motion?
Well, I'm concerned that we have the authority to pass an ordinance that ignores covenants which have been proven and upheld time and time again when they come before court. How can we have an ordinance that just wholesale ignores or renders that is neutered? That doesn't make sense to me.
But we got to listen to our
And
attorney.
so my motion would be, I would like this studied before we make a ruling to find out whether or not we, as a Board of Commissioners in our ordinances, have a right to overrule or, I'm gonna say supersede covenances that have been put into the different developments.
Okay.
Because this could have legs if we do this.
Do I have a second to that motion? Okay, dies for lack of second. Madam Attorney, do you have anything
I'm
that you
gonna
can contribute to this?
I do. I can tell you what I'm looking at, which are the protective and restrictive covenants for Crystal Acres subdivision, section 4. So I don't have any information to tell you about this particular property, which is in Crystal Acres subdivision, section 2. I can tell you that if this was a continuation, so I don't know that these covenants are applicable to the lot that's before you today, because this is only applicable to lots 82 to 131, and the subject lot is lot 29. If there was a similar document that we have not seen that exists, it does clearly prohibit any use other than residential purpose, and it also prohibits fences without the written approval of Kenneth Lloyd. As I sit here this evening, I don't know if these restrictive covenants apply to section 2. And the remedy here is, as was said, would be a private action by the landowner. The only other thing I would add to you is, rather than taking an action this evening that might then invite private action by the landowner, is to recognize that it's not necessarily an ordinance, so to speak. What it is a permit to authorize the use. And I would say that if with particular restrictions, if any of those restrictions are not met, in other words, if the fence isn't built or if the hours of operation are not adhered to, then it doesn't comply with the conditional use permit that you're considering this evening. You might want to consider another restriction so long as it is consistent with the restrictive covenants for section 2, or you may not want to impose that additional restriction. But if not, you could potentially be authorizing a conditional use permit that is contrary to the restrictive covenants for that section of that subdivision.
But we don't know it.
So we have a motion and a second that we approve this. Madam Attorney, it would appear to me that the appropriate thing for us to do here is to investigate this to see if this lot does fall under those covenants. And if they do, I would suggest that she get a letter from the owner or who is it that has the development, Lloyd? or-
Kenneth Lloyd.
Get a letter from him granting permission for that. Does that make sense, Madam Attorney?
It would if that's the desire of this board. You certainly,
Okay,
you would
that's my
eliminate
thought,
any issue.
but we do have a motion and a second.
And may I ask James one more question? James, that is a very large area that Mr. Lloyd has developed out there, as you know, Old River Road, Highway 33 and all of that, and it's different sections.
Right.
And those sections are big. Are there any more daycare centers out there in that area? Because it's a large area. I think, it sounded to me, we approved.
I think there's one other, I can't say for sure,
I
Mr.
think we
James.
have. I think
There-
we've already
There's one on
approved.
Old River Road, I can't remember if it's actually in the subdivision or
Yeah,
not.
but he developed a lots, but, what I'm thinking about is those people that are going to be, didn't you say you have 5 kids there now that you are looking out for?
They are her own kids.
Wait a minute.
No,
they're
no.
not.
But they're
Daycare.
not at this location.
But she's moving there.
She's got, that's where
Okay,
she's
but you
going.
do not have 5 kids at this location, at this point in time? Okay,
But she's licensed to come out on Thursday, but I have to have this permit before she will approve, transfer my license.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I believe your recommendations would be very appropriate.
Okay, do you make that motion? Or so, as a substitute motion, because we have a motion on the floor.
I'm reluctant because Mr. Kenneth Lloyd's goes to my office for a lot of
Okay,
legal work,
I
so I'm
understand.
about to abstain on any vote.
Okay,
Could
so,
may I say one thing?
Yes.
We have a letter signed by the person who owns the property,
Yeah.
yes,
who is the owner of the property in that subdivision, which we don't know whether it's under this covenant or not. So it seems to me that then the issue would be between the lady who owns the property, I think it was a woman, yes, Faber Doe, and the person who built the area, whatever, the developer. So I'm still inclined to let's, vote so that she can start the balls rolling, and then if they want to do something about it, let them do it.
Okay, let's hear from our manager, then I'll get to you,
Okay.
Tom.
I wanted to express, I think that restrictive covenants are important and that they are, need to be enforced privately between parties. My concern is the precedence this would set if the board were to approve this conditional use permit based upon a restrictive covenant. Then are we, from here on out, is staff going to be responsible for doing type of title searches to see if there are any other restrictive covenants that would affect future permits for conditional use permit and whatnot that we'd be responsible for making sure those are, that we're not doing any action contrary to those, so.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have a fiduciary responsibility to do that because we accept tax money from these people. Whether it's direct or indirect, whether they rent or not, there's tax money comes in. And yeah, it may cause a little bit of research pain, but let's say we don't. The fact is, to my knowledge, this is the first time that somebody's brought this up. Quite frankly, I never thought of it before, that it could be an infringement upon a covenant. But I used to live in a neighborhood where, it's a long story and I won't go into it, but the covenants eventually got upheld because there were people that fought it. The thing is, I don't believe that when they sell the property that it's up to just the builder anymore. The mere fact that he has now sold those properties, I think that a majority of the people in the neighborhood have got to sign off on it before the covenants can be overruled. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm pretty sure about that.
Mr. Chairman, could I give just one example? And it's not a zoning-related matter, but this is something that's historically happened here in the county. The restrictive covenants usually are more restrictive than the county's regulations. So in some subdivisions, for example, developers go in and they want to have a setback standard that may be higher than the county's. I can tell you when we go out, as far as building code, and we are looking at the county's minimum requirements. If we've got a 30-foot setback and the developer has a 50-foot, we only require them to set back that 30-foot. That's, you can look at the same cause and effect.
You are
here for this.
reinforcing my whole argument.
Again, that is a private restriction, and the county, to my knowledge, could not enforce that.
But can the county, this is the question, do we have legal authority to force an action that runs counter to a covenant? And I don't think we do.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it has, nobody's proved it's a covenant now. Also, now, let's point out, James, the 6-foot fence statewide, it's only 4 foot. They are up in 2 foot from what it was supposed to be, as you probably already know. I've been through this before.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Webb.
Thank you. Just from what I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like we're forcing anything. It just sounds like we're approving that the permit was properly obtained and completed and in accordance with our rules and regulations. Not that daycare center has to be there. And I guess the gray area is what you consider a business, but based on our ordinances and what we can consider and what's before us, it is not a business or considered a business, and it meets our requirements. I just don't like us, I don't want us to start getting outside of our purview of where we need to be, and that we should be considering what we can control. And everything else is a private civil matter that can be litigated or cease and desist or whatever.
Okay.
But it's just not, I mean, we're not recognizing the covenants, and we're not saying the covenants don't matter. We're saying that there was an application made, it meets our regulations, and
I call for the question.
I was about to do that. I think everyone has talked about it that wants to talk about it. We have a motion to approve it, and it has been properly seconded. So let's vote on that motion. Tom? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That passes. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. We now have a presentation of our comprehensive annual financial report And I believe Mr. Holder is going to present that.
Property rights is the foundation of this country. And I just don't understand it.
I didn't. I didn't.
Well, I hope they sue. I hope they do.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Pleased to present to you on this evening the county's annual financial report. Mr. Brian Epley from Martin Starnes. Mr. Epley is our senior auditor with the firm, and he has what I believe to be some good news on the results of our annual financial audit. I will note that your abstract does say that at the time of the printing, the audit had not been submitted to the local government commission. It actually, at this point, has been submitted, and we are awaiting approval from them. Additionally, I'd just like to acknowledge Mr. Chris McDaniel, our Assistant Finance Director, who's been very instrumental in assisting me and the department in getting through yet another year's audit. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the department heads and their respective staff who have also been instrumental in helping us get through this audit. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Epley.
Thank you.
Good evening. As Mr. Holder said, my name is Brian Epley. I'm a senior with Martin Starnes. I believe this is my 6th year working on the county's audit. And what I have is basically some audit highlights from this year's audit. We'll touch on some different things. Some things Dwayne and I have already communicated back and forth, and things that he feels are important. He did mention that it has been at this point submitted to the Local Government Commission, which is the oversight board for North Carolina. We expect typically around a 5 to 10 day turnaround for approval. In my experience with the strenuous review processes that we have internally in our firm, typically we don't see any kind of comments or anything like that. So basically we could expect approval maybe at the end of this week, beginning to mid of next week, and obviously I'll let Mr. Holder know at that point in time. So again, what I have is basically some PowerPoint highlights, and with that we'll move forward. The first slide here just basically identifies that we had an unmodified opinion. That's a little different than what you would have seen in the past. In the past, you would have seen unqualified. GASB 65 and 63 were approved this year, which is basically some verbiage change. That what was previously called net assets is now called net position. There's some clarity standards and some other transparency type things that the board feels helps the reader of the financials better understand what's at place and where the financial position is. Unmodified is an A+. For general purposes, it means that there was nothing in there that would cause me to modify my opinion that the financial statements are materially correct. So another highlight here is that the monthly reports presented by Mr. Holder and his staff were in line with the end audit results, which should give the board confidence that what you're seeing monthly is real-time data, and that you're not having to wait from June 30th until November the 18th to see where the county stands financially, which certainly would seem to help the board make educated decisions. There was an increase in available fund balance. That's the measuring stick, if you will, that the Local Government Commission uses to measure financial health, and the board also uses, obviously, to measure how things are going. And again, as Mr. Holder mentioned, the staff was terrific. I've worked with Chris for 6 years now, and first couple of years working with Mr. Holder, and very, very cooperative. I never have any issues getting things, and that certainly isn't necessarily the situation everywhere that I go. So my personal thanks to all the staff and department heads and everyone that put work into getting things done timely and correctly. The first slide, financial slide that we have is some basic, it's a 3-year comparative of revenue and expenditures for the general fund. You can see the current year, the revenues are in the burgundy or the red, the expenditures are in the green. That includes transfers. So the current year revenue was roughly 130 million, expenditures coming in at roughly 127 million. This is a visual of your top 3 revenues. As you would expect, ad valorem taxes, which would encompass your real and your motor vehicle. It's the largest piece of the pie. Other taxes and licenses are going to be sales tax and other kind of, you got sales and use and other, the tax that the county actually pays and is remitted. And then restricted and governmental are going to be your federal and state grants. Those large top 3 make up 119.4 million of the 130. So obviously the largest portion. The next 3 slides are going to be a breakdown of 3-year comparison of those top 3 revenues. The first slide is ad valorem taxes. Obviously in 2012 there was the reval. So there's the discrepancy there from 2012 to 2013. Other taxes and licenses. Obviously, this is all the licensing that the county does, but also the major component of this is the sales tax. Up some this year. You know, we're seeing this basically across the board. It's consistent. Economy starts to recover slowly. That's kind of indicative of that number. Not a tremendous amount of growth, but up some from last year. Restricted intergovernmental, basically consistent. It was near what was budgeted. And again, these are your state and federal grants. Same type of information for the expenditures for the general fund. Again, just another visual to help you see kind of what makes up the pie. The top 3, and this is excluding transfers, make up roughly $120 million. Human services is the largest, well, education is actually the largest portion. Human services is right there at it at 31%, and then public safety is 24%. That's very typical for those 3 to be the 3 drivers. Same type of information. The next 3 slides will be those largest 3 expenditures broken down 3-year comparative. This is budgetary decrease from year to year. This is management driven and a part of a plan. So general government expenditures are about 12.1 million this year. Public safety relatively flat, coming in at 29.3. So not a tremendous change from last year when you look at the volume. Human services, relatively the same too. Most of this is going to be Department of Health and Human Services type expenditures. And the education, 39 million, so relatively flat there as well. Our next slide is just the definition of the breakdowns in fund balance and what they mean if you were to look at the financial statement. Kind of help the board better understand what the classifications mean, what the restrictions may be. We'll start at the top. Non-spendable is essentially what it says. Non-spendable would be something that can't be liquefied inventory or something that's prepaid. It is a type of equity, however, it can't be appropriated, it can't be spent. Restricted is something that would be restricted by a third party, such as debt covenants or such as grant proceeds, debt proceeds, that kind of stuff. Committed is internal constraints that has to be done via board resolution. And it can be undone, but it takes the board approval. And assigned is going to be something that management has the authority to assign or unassign. The unassigned portion is obviously the part that can be appropriated. The next slide is our definition, or the LGC definitions of available fund balance. And to arrive at that, which isn't presented on the face of the financials, but it is, again, the Local Government Commission's measuring stick, if you will, of financial health. You take total fund balance in the general fund and you subtract the non-spendable portion, which is again prepaids, inventories, and then stabilization by state statute, which is LGC provides a template that calculates this number. There's things such as receivables that go into it, restricted cash, deferred inflows, and other types of unearned revenues go into this calculation. That's statewide. Everyone uses this same calculation, so it's relatively uniform across the different units. You subtract those two components out of your total fund balance to get your available fund balance. To get your fund balance percentage, you compare your available fund balance to an annual amount of expenditures for that fund to get your available fund balance percentage. So the next two slides are going to be us looking at that comparative this year to prior year, and looking at our percentage-wise. So total fund balance in the general fund ending 2013 was 27,308. 483. Non-spendable was 150,981. Our stabilization number came in at about 7.7 million. So available fund balance was ending at 19.4 million. It's up about 1.5 from the prior year. So the effect that had on the percentage, as you can see, this is about 5 years of comparative, 13.69 in 2012 to 15.26 at June 30th, 2013. As you can see, since 2011, there's been some growth in that area. It may or may not be where the board intends, but there seems to be a trend. The next 5 or 6 slides we got are going to be some budget versus actual for the revenues and expenditures that just kind of shows where we thought things were going to be and where they actually ended up. Ad valorem taxes the final budget was about 75.8. We had a positive variance of 76.7. Restricted intergovernmental was a little under budget, ending up at 25.2 million. Other taxes and license, like I said, the major change there is the sales tax was a little higher than what was originally budgeted, which is a positive variance. And we'll do the same type of comparative analysis for our budget versus actual and expenditure side. And this is a positive variance in the general government as well. Even though it was budgeted to be lower than the 2012 numbers, it was the final numbers were still even lower than the budgeted amount. Human services budgeted amount was 41 million, and final 2013 number was 37.4 million. And public safety was just about on course for what was budgeted. Education was exactly because we basically know what was going to be appropriated to those guys. So those are the slides. Be glad to entertain any questions that the board may have. Or
Any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Owens.
I believe your first chart,
would you like me to go back to it?
if you probably remember it, but
Okay.
I might be wrong in my memory.
Yeah.
But you had revenues and expenditures.
Right.
If I remember correctly, about $3 million variance.
Right.
All right. Then your increase in your fund balance was how much?
Well, that was available. The increase in general fund balance was that 3 million and something. The increase in available
That's the totality of it, is that correct?
of total fund balance, correct?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yes.
All right. I just wanted to compare, put those apples to oranges there. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, no problem.
Any additional questions or comments? I have one comment. When you read that chart 81, on page 81, about the available fund balance.
Okay. You let me
said
go back to that slide?
That had been increasing, and you didn't know whether or not that was our plan or not. Let me tell you, that was our plan.
Well, very
That
good.
was a deliberate plan on our part, and we are still shooting to make that even greater. We want to get it back up to the 18%. So to me, in this whole package, that page 81 is the most pleasing chart
Very good.
you have, because that is a positive trend, and we want to keep that. Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a motion
Motion
that
to
we
approve.
accept this report?
Second.
Motion and second, let's vote. Okay, thank you. The next item is our public addresses to the board. I don't have anyone that has signed up. Is there anyone who would like to come forward and address us? If you do, you may come forward. I do not see any, so we shall now move on towards our items for report. And the first one is our monthly financial report from Mr. Holder.
Move we accept it.
Did he leave?
Yeah, he went out with the people.
Okay, we have a motion you've looked at the report anyway. It's showing us in good shape. So I have a motion. Do I have a second? to
Second.
Accept it? Okay, any discussion or questions? Okay, let's vote. Thank you. The next one is our tax collections report for October. Ms. Booker? Oh, very good. Come forward, sir.
Ms. Booker could not be here tonight. I'm Raymond Ravello, the Deputy Collector. As we included in your packet, the fiscal year-to-date, July through October of 2013, the combined collection rate, which includes real and personal property as well as registered motor vehicles, is 65.10%. And this is a slight increase as compared to the rate of 1 year ago, 64.37. Tax Administration continues to pursue all outstanding taxes using the necessary enforcement remedies that are available through the general statutes.
Okay, any questions? Do I have a motion we approve this report?
Second.
Motion, second. Let's vote. Thank you. Next item is an item for report on our 700 megahertz radio system, and Mr. Lee is going to present that.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I'll be very brief with this in making this report. I think when we finally transitioned, we gave a fairly lengthy report, so I'll try to summarize it. Basically just say it's been in operation for a little over a year. It seems hard to believe that that year has taken place, but it has. Both the radio and paging system continues to meet the required specifications that was recommended by Federal Engineering and designed by Motorola. Project was implemented to update communications equipment with state-of-the-art equipment that was capable of meeting the FCC requirements to narrowband, and we were able to meet that. And so, just to remind you that this project was broke up into 3 different phases: the radio system, the recorder, and the paging system. I'm just summarize real quickly those 3 systems. The radio system still, as I said, meets the contract specifications of 95% on the street with a DAQ of 3.4, and that DAQ stands for Deliverable Audio Quality. It was tested in August of 2012. System was operational in 2012. Today, we have over 11,000 users on the system, which represent county fire, EMS, EM, animal control, the detention center, and we do have 2 partnering agencies, Greenville Public Works and the town of Winterville. We have over 100 talk groups that are available for them to communicate to where they can get off on separate channels and not compete with communications as we have had in the past with that. So that is very good. We do offer some interoperability, but not as great as what we want. Once the P25 conversion of fiber takes place, will actually increase even the interoperability even more from that. We've had no critical failures with the radio system, and also we were able to negotiate with Motorola where that system is now monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if there's any problems with the infrastructure, it is found early on, and from that point, Motorola can actually, from Schaumburg, Illinois, can actually dispatch wireless communication, who is our service provider. So that is a very good positive note there. Do have some concerns that are issued by the fire and EMS that in certain areas of the county that they do get out of range. This is not a whole lot on the street, but mainly in buildings, which there was not a whole lot of building penetration developed into the system. The 95% on the street was a national standard that we were able to look at. The NICE recorder, system operational in September 2012. We have had a few issues with the NICE recorder. I'll be honest and upfront with you. But these issues we've been able to work through with Motorola and to be able to resolve those issues. And currently right now, this system also is being monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This was part, when we had those issues, we were able to negotiate that monitoring part of it. And also right now, Motorola and NICE are still looking at what they found. They have some old switches that was used in the system that are not performing as they had hoped they would. So they're looking at replacing those and should be replaced probably within 2 to 3 weeks. We have no large concerns with the recorder that are not already being addressed. The paging system still meets the 94% on the street for the voice and 95% for the alert with a DAQ of 3.0. operational in 2012. We have over 1,000 pagers now being paged out on this system. The infrastructure components are also being monitored by Motorola 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Additional tests have been conducted by Motorola because, again, some of the concerns has been poor audio quality in some of the areas. Motorola has came back in with wireless communication, done spot tests, and verified that the tests that were conducted back in 2012, that they still meet the actual contract specifications. One of the other things that I do want to mention to you, not for sure if you're aware, but we have, working with MIS, have developed an alternate means of notification. So when actually a call comes in and 911 starts to develop that report, when they pull that record in, it actually generates a text message that's automatically sent. 911 people do not even know that it's happening. They cannot go back in and create a text and send it out because this one's pulled automatically. So that is a good thing that's there. In conclusion, I think the radio and paging system is working as designed, and I think it's working fairly well. County was able to meet the FCC narrowband requirements. Radio system provides state-of-the-art equipment and allows more interoperability than we've ever had before in the county. Additional interoperability will increase, as I said, once Viper goes P25. Due to some concerns, again, Wireless and Motorola have been back in to our area and done numerous tests to actually test to see if the system is still meeting qualifications, and they do. They found no issues where both systems did not meet the required specifications. You know, I think we do have to look at those concerns, and Motorola does agree with that, and they're looking at any type of viable option that may help increase those areas where they do have poor audio, especially on the paging. So at this time, if you have any questions, Mr. Chairman, I try to keep it short.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Webb.
Thank you. I've just got a few for you, Noel.
Okay.
When's the P25 supposed to be? I know I should probably know that because we're going through it too.
It's still a target date shooting for. I was told recently that they're hoping now that second quarter 2014 that should. Let me also state now, our 700 system is already P25
Right.
plus it's phase 2. The Viper system will only be phase 1.
Well, that's just my concern because I know like, communicating with the Viper radio, especially when, for example, land in the East Care, ran into that issue, being able to communicate directly with them. Once that P25 is done, will the 700 be able to communicate with the Vipers?
Okay, let me explain a little bit of that because I think, you know, when you say we had some problems with East Care, I want to say that, you know, the Divided Air Transport, we're using a reserved helicopter that did not have anything but VHF on that helicopter.
So have they been using the regular?
Yes, sir.
It would've been
We're
fine,
able to
good.
patch those two together. So, and had we stayed with the actual patching of the 700 system and the Viper system, the ground units could have talked to Vidant Communications, who could have relayed the information. So, I just want to explain that just a little bit. Could go in more detail if need to.
No, I get that. And my only other question, I guess, is really about the building penetration and the problems we're having with paging and out on, you know, in the Grifton area, maybe over at Fountain, that where you're not receiving things. Could we have done more? Is there some infrastructure that we need to look into putting in place over the next few years?
Commissioner Webb, most time when you go back and you look at what national standards is on the street, it is hard to take and build a system that truly provides building penetration. You do have some building penetration, but it may not be to the expectation of everyone of what that is. I think when you go back and look, can you build one? You can probably build one, but you can never build a system, either radio or paging, that's 100%. Federal engineering said if you could get anybody truthfully to guarantee you a 95% in the street, you're doing great. To go back and start to look, he says, federal basically says, it's hard that they'll guarantee any building because you can't determine what the construction is.
Right, and we just
have
have
so many factors that affect that ability.
Sure. And we just have a few departments, I feel like they don't completely trust their equipment when it comes to a few of the things. And, you know, I don't know that without that trust, they make the best decisions that they can make. And I just want to, as we work and you continue the work you're doing to get more coverage, that, we build that trust with them so they trust their equipment.
Yeah, and I'm not going to disagree. I think the radio system is probably working a lot better than the paging system as far as all, because one of the things on 700 system digital, it's either going to work or it's not going to work. There's no, on VHF, because it's analog, it degrades. So you're going to start to get audio distortion to a certain degree. So,
Thank
but
you.
again, they are looking at any options could be.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Manager?
Noel, can you explain or tell the board on one instance where you had a concern expressed by, I think, a fire department, you had the fire marshal go out and test the same area, and you talked about weather conditions and what that resulted in? That was just one instance that a concern was expressed, but I thought might be enlighten the board on that.
We have received numerous complaints sometimes, and we'll try to follow up on all of those, either by doing internal testing or actually going to Motorola and wireless and having those tested by them. This instance, actually, I sent Alan Everett, our fire marshal, to those locations, and we tested, and they work perfect. There are certain conditions, from sunspots, to weather conditions, to terrain, elevation, temperatures, that can affect the system. That one, it's hard for us to go back and validate there was an issue. I'm not saying I don't trust, because I do trust the fire and EMS. But again, when you go back to try to prove it and it's working, it's hard to fix something that you can't find that's working.
Mr. James?
Yes, what was the final cost and how did we stack up there? That's one of the big problems that we had in the beginning, the amount of money that we were going to spend.
Mr. James, I'm not going to give you the exact figures, but I'm going to give you round figures. The actual radio system was about 3.6. The recording system was a little less than 500,000, and the paging system a little over 500,000.
So you're talking about maybe.
We were looking at about $4.6 million, which I think we've already made one payment and in the process of making the second payment.
All right, what is the cost upkeep or approximately, these things there, once you get them, still got a lot of problems keeping them up to date. What's the cost upkeep on them?
That's going to be one of the things that we'll have to start to address. We, during our negotiations with Motorola, we secured 3 years of free maintenance, which was a big plus for us.
Oh, yeah.
As we start to move forward, it's going to cost a little bit additional, but we were already providing infrastructure on, maintenance on infrastructure that we did have. It will increase some, but we're in the process now of starting to gather those figures to start to work into the budget cycle, which will not be this budget cycle, but will be the next budget cycle.
What kind of
So I hope fund balance will be up by then.
What kind of system do you have for these other outfits to pay Pitt County for the operations of this system?
You talking about for the partnering agencies?
Yes.
Greenville Public Works and Town of Winneville, both are fire and public works. Over there, it's a little less than 300 subscriber units. It's $10 a month.
In other words, like you said, the helicopters from med school and so forth,
They're not part of our system, but if they became a partnering agency, that's what it would cost them. $10 a month, $120 a year.
I see that we've got our sheriff here. How's yours working, Neil?
My system is a Viper system.
So you're not with the same one?
We have.
That's what.
We have them in our consoles, and we can talk to them if we need to. We're doing some simulcasting now, it's working out real well.
That's, Noah, you were involved in when we had the flood. You know what we went through. That's what I don't understand. Why isn't all, the police department, the sheriff, the highway patrol, why aren't we on an interlocked system that we can all talk to one another?
Mr. James, when we developed the system here, and it was recommended by federal and designed by Motorola, we included all of your 700, 4 of your 700 conventional channels that anybody operating on a 700 or 800 platform can have loaded on their radio. That's direct interoperability. Now, the sheriff will tell you right now they're going through the process of rebanding their radios. which it is including those full 700 channels. We also have loaded into all of the APX radios or the 700 side, all of the 700 and 800 interoperability channels, which the Viper system can. I do want to remind you one more, that when we were looking at it, Viper was a viable option, other than there were no IDs. We could not get onto their system, and not even sure if we could even be on it today.
All right, National Guard, could we even communicate with them now, say if we had something like we had in 99?
There are two different things. The National Guard also operates off Viper, which have those interoperable channels that, yes, we could, plus the state and us also have cache of radios that we could distribute to those agencies in the event that they did not have
So the answer is yes to
Yes,
Mr. James?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr. James, if I can
I
add,
can tell you, I'm not through yet, go ahead.
if I can add too, that the administration of the prior sheriff had opted to use grant funds primarily to go with the Viper option compared to the radio system we have. So that decision for the sheriff's office was made prior to us entering into the system. Like Noel alluded to, there was not the capacity within the Viper system for us to have all of our local agencies hook into that system, but we do have the interoperability that Sheriff Elks talked about and Noel has talked about.
Yeah. Let me say this to you, don't get rid of these. I went through it, and I know the best line of communication.
Mr. James, I agree with you. They are still
The best.
alternate means of communications, but does it work everywhere?
Does yours work everywhere? I just
Doesn't.
got to say that.
No, it doesn't. I've been in buildings before, go deep in the hospital, try your cell phone.
Oh, yeah, these big buildings is where you have your problems, not out in, unless you're in the pine woods or something like that. I know, I'm out there. But anyway, we appreciate it all, but it's.
Okay, any further questions of Mr. Lee? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item for report is our County Human Services Agency report. This is an item we discussed at our last meeting, and our manager is going to follow up with that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got myself down on this item as well as the county attorney. As a follow-up to your last meeting, November 4th, we as staff were asked to come back and provide you some information regarding the newly enacted legislation by the North Carolina General Assembly dealing with consolidation of human services agencies. In the abstract, we've provided you some preliminary information. I can't say this is the end-all of everything out there, but information we were able to gather between the last two meetings, and this is all per the legislation enacted back in 2012 dealing with House Bill 438. And the information we provided you, beginning on page 101, is actually information that we gleaned from the School of Government at Chapel Hill. And basically, under the general statute and under the law that was approved, there's three ways to organize. And again, let me preface this by saying that I think if the board is really interested in learning more detail about this, we have the School of Government come down and do a presentation, which they're doing to counties that are interested in this, as well as the DSS board has a consultant, Sylvia Johnson, is very well versed on this too, that could help flesh out the pros and the cons. But on page 101, there are three options listed there. Under option one, in terms of the organization, under this option, you as a Board of Commissioners, you do not change the overall organization of the DSS agency, and under this option, there's no combination of multiple agencies. You would assume the direct powers and duties of one or more of the governing boards. In my mind, and the county attorney can agree or disagree with this, I would think that this is probably, if you're going to go in this direction, this is probably, option one is probably the one you'd be looking at. Option 2 or 3 deal with you combining 2 or more human services agencies. And we talk about the different agencies in Pitt County that can be combined. You're talking about obviously the Department of Social Services, the Pitt County Health Department, the Veteran Services Division, as well as the Pitt Area Transit System, PATS. Under option 2, you as a board, in terms of governance, you would appoint a new Consolidated Human Services Board. Now, in the case of DSS, if you're wanting just to consolidate them, you can consolidate them as a single agency under that option. Then with option 3, you, under that option, would become the governing board of the agency. The school government also listed out some what they call process considerations that the county would need to consider. And I've got these bulleted out here, everything from a public hearing. If you were to look at wanting to serve as the governing board for the new agency, you must hold a public hearing, and there's a requirement in terms of notice on that. State Personnel Act, there's considerations there that you need to make. Right now, the employees of DSS and the director are covered by the State Personnel Act. Even though they're county employees, they also are covered by that Personnel Act of state government. And you have the option to pull them under the county's umbrella, where they would no longer be state employees, or you can leave them as state employees under that Personnel Act. In terms of an advisory committee, on page 102, you need to decide, if you don't assume the powers and duties of the board, you may want to appoint an advisory committee if you, again, pursue this, along the lines of the planning board. The planning board is an advisory committee that makes recommendations to you on land use matters. You had several before you tonight, which you had their recommendation on that. And then agency leadership is the last item in terms of appointing a director and how that process may flesh itself out depending upon which option is picked. So at this point, this is preliminary information, but I think in a nutshell, it captures in a broad brushstroke what is available and what can be done. At this point, this is what we brought before you. I don't know if the attorney wants to add anything to that, or.
Okay, Mr. Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to thank the staff for looking into that and getting it back to us so quickly with these options. I think that we should definitely consider the presentation from the School of Government, just so that we have all the information. And though, we start looking into this, I think that we should still proceed with prudence and caution to ensure that whatever decision we make, if we choose one of these options or choose to keep things the way they are, that we are getting enough information to know that we're doing what's best for the citizens of this county. But I do want to just restate, though, that no matter what we do here, it doesn't change, in my opinion, the need for the state to look into the operations and the allegations that were brought forth before of what was going on over there, to ensure that, if nothing else, to reestablish the credibility of the county and the agency, or to ferret out any wrongdoing that was going on. So I just wanted to restate my call for that need, but also that in how we handle any consolidation, that we do so in prudence and time, and making sure we have the good information that we need. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Owens?
I think the issue that has been brought to the manager to report back to us was well taken. Each of us knows that over the last 30 to 40, 50 years that the federal government has had a great deal of waste. There's been a great deal of fraud involved in it, and the state of North Carolina also had that. But at the last General Assembly, or whenever this provision here was brought about, it was certainly an overture from the state to try to do away with some of this waste and some of the fraud that has plagued this country financially. I think these points that we've got here is well taken. I'd be very interested in hearing more about it. But while we're reviewing and looking, I have some concern about the funding, about the financing. And if you have control and appointing authority, then certainly you've got this federal, you've got the state, and you've got the matching by the county. And I don't want to get into the thrust that if we got a little control, that we're going to have to put more county money in it. And that's one of my concerns, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McLaughlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to certainly thank Scott and Janice for this very fine report. I think that we should, at this point, receive this report for information only, and that we certainly take no action. I don't think the system is broken. I think as long as the system is working properly, that we should continue with our current system. It is, however, good to know that we have options. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that this is something that we should just receive now for information only and continue on the course that we're going.
Very good. Mr. James?
Yes. I think that as we look at this, we got to remember that who will serve it, the type of people that will serve it, Mr. Chairman, they are in need. And if any county commissioner think that we are up there on that board wasting money, you need to come up there and join us, Mr. Chairman. Believe me. And I mean that sincerely, because that board is concerned about the citizens of Pitt County, about the employees of Pitt County. And I think that we need to be very concerned with which route we go. We ought to have learned something about mental health. You don't want to lose control, and like Commissioner Owens does. And you better take and make the plans. And Mr. Chairman, I'm for going slow, but I'm for us, you might say, not combining 3, 4 of these boards. We're already big enough. And if you appoint a good health board, they can control it with your help. I really believe it. You own that, Mr. Chairman. You know what it is. And I'm on that board, I want to invite each of you to come and join us anytime that you feel like it. It's an open meeting. Believe me, it is. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, what you will do is like, Mr. Manager, like we've talked, that you're going to bring us directions as to which way to go. And I hope that we will make the right decisions for all, not only the citizens, but for the workers that we have there. Because you've got a lot of dedicated people, and they do the very best that they can with the knowledge that they have. I think it is our responsibility as a Board of Commissioners to make sure that our employees are trained and are able to do what is required of them to take and to do. All you have to do is look at Obamacare. That computer system was not prepared. Look at ours. Our computer system was not prepared to take and to do what the state of North Carolina asked us, the social service people, to do. That's about all I have to say. But I think that we are on the right directions. I think we just got to get in there and make what we have better. I really do. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems to me that this is something that I would like to hear more, just as some of the commissioners have said. But I would not want gaining information, which I never think hurts anybody. The more you know, I think the better decisions you can make, to in any way send a message to the hardworking boards we have, not just in human services, but in other areas in the county. I would not want to send a message that we are unhappy with what's going on and we are looking at a total new way to do things. I want to look at this as just informing us and helping us to move forward to help these boards do a better job, and as good a job as they possibly can with all the support that we can put behind them. Now, the other thing I want to say is this, to me, reiterates to all of us what we started talking about 2 years ago, about this same time, I think, how important it is to get good, competent people, our citizens from the county, to serve on these boards and sit there and help with making these decisions. It's not an easy thing to do, and you have to give a lot of time, and you have to be able to listen and learn and make good decisions. And that goes for every board we have, but particularly I feel like our Human Services Board, because that really does deal with all of our citizens. And I don't think there's a commissioner sitting up here that has lost confidence in any of our boards, and I would never want them to feel that. So I don't mind getting more information, and it may be a good thing to invite some chairman or some people from some boards to sit in on whatever session we have. I don't know, but I just want to make sure that the boards out there know that we support them and we appreciate their service. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I agree with your comments, Ms. Ward. I do not want to do anything to send a message that we do not have confidence in our boards, because all of us serve on different boards. And the boards I serve on, the people that are on those boards are very competent, They're committed, they're involved, they're knowledgeable, and their desire is to do a good job for this county. And I appreciate all of them being willing to give of their time, their talents, and their energies to the county. Yes, Mr. Manager.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to mention, as the Board of Commissioners is aware and the public is aware as well, that Mr. Perry has announced his impending retirement for the end of January. The DSS Board had discussed that at their last meeting, and we're discussing their desire to go ahead and advertise and try to recruit comprehensively for a replacement for Mr. Perry. I advised them until this report was presented tonight that they should probably hold off in terms of advertising, but time will quickly escape us in terms of him leaving, and even if they were to probably start advertising now, they'd probably need to appoint an interim until the replacement is selected and they can give notice and so forth. I would advise that maybe to allow the advertisement to go ahead and proceed on that. We'll go ahead and call in the school government, try to get them on an agenda in the next meeting or two, and then if you decide to move in the direction of consolidation, you can still be in control of the selection and hiring, or if you decide to leave the model as is, where the DSS board is independent, they can then continue on that route as well. But I think it'd be important to go ahead and get the advertisement out there, get applications in, so that process can be begun.
And I personally agree with that.
And I agree
Mr.
with
Wood.
that, and I would want to make sure that they know that I think everybody on this board feels that we should widen our search and make sure, because we have a good program in most of our, in all of them. I feel very proud of what we have in Pitt County. So I would want to make sure that we looked out, and because I think there would be people who'd be very interested in coming here to work. With that said, I don't know that we need a motion, but I would like to support the recommendation that they go on and be looking for an interim.
Yes.
Because that takes a little while to figure out who you would like for that person to be, and also to do the search, because that's a long, involved type of situation, so.
I'd second it.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is the wishes also of your Board of Social Services, and we want it to be a very, very broad look, not just in Pitt County, but to the state of North Carolina. And we want to secure that person that will lead social services. We want to get the very best that we can get. And I think we're on the right road when we get the interim and then advertise, because we're talking about 6 months. We're not talking about a month or thing.
Yes. Does anyone else have any comments? I think that we don't need a motion, but we do, I believe you do have consensus, Mr. Manager,
Of what he
to ask
suggests.
the Department of Social Services Board to move forward with the recruiting process. Any objections, questions, comments? Okay, thank you. That was for information only anyway. The next item is our manager's report, and Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few items to run down with you on. Next meeting dates for the month of December, last month of the calendar year of 2013, will be respectively Monday, December 2nd and Monday, December 16th. Boards which Pitt County government is currently recruiting for and advertising for is the Pitt County Child Fatality Prevention Team, the Greenville Board of Adjustment, the Aid and Planning Board, and the Pitt County Board of Adjustment. Item C on the agenda concerns the Pitt County logo flag, and Commissioner Glenn Webb, I think, wanted to make a comment on this, and we also have a picture on the screen to go with it.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. This is just a good news note. The flag's been returned home by the 514th and is awaiting a display case to be put in the county building, which we'll decide later, and the flag will go out with any National Guard units from Pitt County that serve overseas. This particular flag, citizens donated $1. We needed about $100 to buy a flag. We ended up taking in almost $300 or over $300 for the flag. It was sent to the 514th. It flew at Command Operation Post Motton Hill, Cost City, and traveled over 300 miles to Bagram Airfield and flew while the 514th conducted their convoy missions. So that was just a little piece of home that they could see coming in and out of base every day that the citizens helped provide for them. And we're glad it's back, and we're glad they're back. And that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the A list of items, the asbestos management program for Pitt County facilities. I have a handout passing to the board here. Basically, on this item, Pitt County government has become, I guess, more compliant with OSHA regulations concerning the topic of asbestos and any potential existence of it in our facilities and buildings. We have performed what they call an ACM study on every facility we own. And ACM stands for Asbestos Containing Materials Study. And basically, we're required to have that and have it on site, have it an annual inspection done by an outside contractor every 3 years, and then actually inspect our buildings annually within that period of time. In doing that, we discovered a couple facilities that needed some work. The Development Services Building, we've actually abated some of the asbestos over there. Along with this document, along with this program, we've created a document called the Asbestos Management Program for Pitt County Facilities that basically is the P's and Q's of how we're going to deal with asbestos as it's in buildings, how we're going to manage it, whether it's in a state of which it can be of harm or whether it's in a solid state and it's not a harm. What I passed to you is an email that was sent out to the occupants of this building and the Pat's building. In doing our last ACM for this facility, we did discover that we do have asbestos in this building. However, at the current time, we don't believe it's of any danger. There's a budget amendment on this agenda to help us use those dollars to abate the asbestos in the building. One of the things we did in working with our contractor, we decided to go ahead and do some baseline air samples about 2 weeks ago of this building, all 5 floors, multiple samples, and also the transportation building. And what we discovered was, through the use of an outside air quality specialist, was that the air quality for the fiber content, whether it's carpet fibers, asbestos fibers, just general air fibers, that in this building, our air quality is 3 times the standard of the EPA, 3 times better. In the transportation services building, we discovered that the air quality there is 2 times better than that standard. So from a breathing intake standpoint, we're fine. This communication here that was sent out to the employees of the 2 buildings basically informs them that our intent is to abate the asbestos, have the asbestos removed. And we're primarily talking about asbestos on the pipes in the ceiling that heat and cool the building. We're going to replace that with a fiberglass type wrap. All the work to be done will be done according to OSHA standards with certified contractor, and they'll be doing air quality testing during the work as well as after all the work is completed, and it's going to take approximately 50 days plus or minus to do the work. So this is to inform you, explain the budget amendment that's on the agenda later. We will be bringing a contract back to you that actually selects the contractor that will do the work. Anticipate that coming back to you on the December 2nd agenda. Next on the agenda, I believe you've received information regarding an informational meeting for the Old Tar / Evans Street widening project. This will be on November 19th, and there's a public officials meeting from 2 to 3. There's an open meeting for the public from 4 to 7, and this is at the Pitt County Shrine Club. Item F is a good news item in terms of the Golden Leaf application that Pitt County government submitted last month for what they call the Community-Based Grants Making Initiative. We've made it through round 1 on both of our projects. Our $1 million project, which is the collaborative of the school system, ECU, Pitt Community College, and a couple of other entities for the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Academy. They have been invited, that collaboration has been invited to submit what they're calling a letter of inquiry to move on to the next phase of the selection of this process. And the second project that was the Bernstein Clinic has also been invited to move on as well. So they'll be submitting a response as well that are due on December 2nd. So we'll keep the board posted as to how these projects move forward into the next phase of this selection. Item G from the last board meeting, you'll recall when Wayne Black, who's the Division Director of Department of Social Services on the state level, which is part of Department of Health and Human Services, came to Pitt County. He and Dean Simpson referenced a readiness assessment. A second readiness assessment was being conducted for our local Department of Social Services, and actually was being done later that day when they came here. I have been in contact with Ms. Simpson and have finally received that report very late this afternoon, have had a cursory look at it once through. Really want to sit down with the DSS staff before I make any public comment on it. If you allow me, let me bring it back to you on December 2nd so I can make some educated remarks on it. I don't want to make anything out of context that would be incorrect. Item H deals with a workers' compensation matter that's been ongoing for a number of years with Pitt County as a legal matter that is now finally settled, and a clincher has been reached on this. We felt the need to come before you and report on this, and the county attorney is going to cover this item for you.
I just very briefly wanted to report out that Safety National, the county's excess insurance carrier, did reach a clincher agreement that was approved by the North Carolina Industrial Commission in the amount of $115,000 on November 7th, 2013, which fully resolved the workers' compensation claim from former Sheriff's Office employee Michelle Pollard. As is protocol, any settlement must be reported out into open session. In addition, Ms. Pollard executed a general release of all claims in favor of Pitt County, and that matter is now closed.
Had one other item, Mr. Chairman, and that is the Health Department has made me aware that they are submitting an application for the expansion of the Nurse Family Partnership Program to expand that program in Pitt County, as it does in a lot of instances, is working with other counties. This will allow the program to expand into Beaufort County. As I understand it, Beaufort doesn't have the numbers of participants to do it on their own, so they're basically teaming with Pitt County to do this. So just wanted to announce that for your information. With that, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, may I just ask on this asbestos stuff? Why did we, if we already 2 or 3 times cleaner than what is required of the federal government, why are we getting involved in this thing and spending all this money?
Well, as I put on the email that I gave you a copy of and I sent to the employees, we consider this preventive maintenance. We know that if we do nothing, that in time, in years to come, it could deteriorate and become airborne. So at this point in time, that's not a concern, but asbestos does break down, and to perform the correct preventive maintenance on the building, it does need to be taken care of.
Well, all right, how much money did, because I know what happens, you know what happens. How much money are you talking about just to do this?
Your budget amendment on the agenda tonight is for $200,000.
That gonna be all?
Lord willing, yes. I hope that's, I anticipate that is the high end, but I don't hold me to it.
All right, okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Let's vote. Thank you. Our next item for decision is a contract between Vidant Medical Center and Pitt County Health Department. And Dr. Morrow is going to come forward and present that. Good evening.
This is a grant that was received through the Department of Transportation to North Carolina, and they have decided to pass that grant from the Division of Public Health, or excuse me, from the Department of Transportation over to Public Health to improve active routes to schools for elementary and middle school students throughout the state. As many of y'all know, we are a regional site for the Community Transformation Grant. This is also a regional grant that the State Division of Public Health administers. And so they're doing this through the same method. What we opted to do is to use the funding to contract with Vidant Injury Prevention. The injury prevention program at Vidant Memorial is longstanding and has got some really good experience in this area. And so this basically is a pass-through grant for us. Vidant Memorial will will hire a coordinator that will cover a 9-county region, including Pitt County, and will help improve active routes to schools. It's about, everybody knows the problem with childhood obesity, and this really is addressing that issue. About 15% of North Carolina school children live within a mile of their school. About 34% of school children live within 2 miles of their school. but only about 4% of children actually walk or ride a bike to school, unlike when we were children. And so this Active Routes to School project is about assessing, taking a look at where these schools are, where the streets, the sidewalks, the bike paths, the greenways, all those things are, so that children, instead of taking a bus or getting in a car to get to school, can get themselves to school safely and get some physical activity while they're doing it.
Okay. Any questions of Dr. Morrow?
He knows why, I'm sure, that they're not riding a bicycle and walking. It's because of the crime that we have. The parents are afraid to trust their kids out there on the road that somebody might pick them up. That's the main reason. Otherwise, I think most of them would walk.
That's a great point, Commissioner James, and it's interesting, though, when you go back and you look at the data from 1960, the crime against children in today is no worse than it was in 1960, back when I was walking to school. So, the perception, however, is that it is more dangerous for children, and that's why we have so many latchkey kids. But the actual data, statistics on the crime against children doesn't support that.
Well, the reason it doesn't support it because all of them are driving cars.
Right.
All you have to do is to go to Falkland, Farmer, any of them, and watch the parents as they bring their kids to school.
Yeah.
And that's the man, I know, I do it. I do it myself.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we've got to reassure those parents that they are comfortable letting their children walk and ride to school. One of the things that does that is the mobile school bus, where the parents actually walk with their children, so
Yes,
that
and
they
that's
make sure they're safe.
That's good, that's the thing.
And this grant also includes those
That's
things
good.
too.
That's what they did.
Okay. Commissioner Owens?
Dr. Marr, do you know what part of this $350,000 we spent on that director and administration?
I'm going to turn to John Reed. I think you
Well,
have,
it's no big deal. I was just wondering if you had it on the top of your head.
I think is it 50?
Salary and benefits, it's going to be about $62,000, $63,000, all in, first year.
Thank you.
Can I apply?
Any additional questions?
He said the first year?
That's right. And that, it should be, I mean, that salary and fringe should be within that,
So
Close to that for the next 2 years.
Where's the other 16,000 go?
the what?
Where's the other 16,000 go?
To the project itself, so operations, there'll be travel involved in it. She's
So
going to
we've
have to
created-
travel 9
we've
counties.
created a job, basically, is what we did.
If you
That's
look on
right.
page
It-
131
this
and
would create a job.
132.
Well, my point is that it's like so many things where at the federal level, there are some organizations that 72 cents out of every dollar goes to administration. Only 28 cents out of the dollar actually gets to the people or to the direct cause. In this case, only 16,000 out of the 79,000 actually gets to the cause. Plus, we've got a person now employed.
Right.
Actually, according to page 131, the first year is $79,000, and all of it is salary, fringe, and travel. And then in year 2, it's $134,000, and in year 3, it's $134,000. And in both of those years, it is salary, fringe, travel, and then interventions, which I don't know what interventions is.
That was my point,
They're the
Mr. Chairman. I'd read
projects, I
that,
would
and I just
imagine,
thought
right?
everybody else ought to know it too.
The interventions would be the projects that they've
Correct.
established.
Yeah.
Ain't no money.
And
Still-
the other
So they're
thing,
Still
gonna-
not much.
the other thing is that this person, I guess one person
Yes.
will be an employee of Vidant. So when this money runs out, Vidant is going to have to figure out, does the program stop then, or do they continue to fund it? Not on our,
You know,
the person is not on our road.
But, Mr. Chairman, principally, if you look at it from the state and the federal level, if they would stop with all these grants, just stop, we'd have a balanced budget, we have a surplus. To me, I see no value in it, or very little value for the dollar. That's my personal opinion.
Well, the risk of a child who's overweight becoming an obese adult is about 70 to 80%. So if we don't do something
Dr.
to
Morrow,
stop
come on,
children
$250,000
from becoming obese adults,
$250,000 over 3 years, is that going to change anything that's going to warrant paying $250,000?
For
If
9
it was coming out of
counties.
everybody's pocket, and at the end of 3 years, you saw, okay, are kids skinnier or are they heavier? I'll bet you'll see no change. This is just another one of those things. I know it's a grant, but, you know, grant money, whether it comes from the federal government or state, it's still people being taxed. But, or worse than that, it's borrowing the money to be able to cover this. We got $1 trillion deficit for 3.5, or for 4 years. This year it's only 60 billion, something like that. Making great progress. At what point can this country finally say, we can't afford this stuff anymore?
Well, Commissioner Colson, I think this is a situation of pay me now or pay me later, and we've been paying later. And what later is intensive care units, diabetes treatments, hypertension treatments, death, disability.
and I'll never be
if we
able to
can
prove
stop children from becoming obese adults,
This won't stop one child from becoming obese.
well, if
Not
it doesn't, then we shouldn't do it.
Absolutely, that's my point. I don't think
But the research
you're not
shows,
going to legislate social change. You can't do that, or legislate morality.
I think you can
said
see what has already happened with things like walking school buses in communities, in other places in the country where they've done active routes to school, where they're getting children walking, they're increasing exercise. This is the first year that we've seen those childhood obesity rates actually level off. For the last 40 years, they've been going up and up and up, and we are finally, through public health interventions, starting to have an
And
impact
for how
in this
many
area.
years has that happened?
Since at least 1985, it's been going
I understand
skyrocketing.
that, but how many years have you seen it level off?
Just this year is the first year.
Statistically, that's insignificant. There is no
Okay.
statistical value. That's an area that I'm kind of an expert in. There is no way that over 1 year that you can say that there is statistically significant information available to say that this is a continuing trend.
I would totally agree with that, but I think we have to start somewhere, and until someone has a better idea, this is the one that I've got
How
today
about
with
parent
money behind it
responsibility?
to do something.
How about more money towards parent responsibility? That's one of the biggest problems we have.
We're doing that too, actually.
I've got the answer to it all. Do like they did 40 years ago. Let the kids work and make some money and learn the value of a dollar. That's all you got to do. I know. I had them picking cucumbers every summer, 30 and 40 head of kids.
But Eugene, when
And
you
it
and I
paid
were
off.
young-
They
when you
lost
and-
weight.
When you and I were younger,
Okay.
I was running equipment in a millwork,
All right,
and you can't
let's,
do that with a kid anymore.
I'm just happy to solve the problem of overweight. Put them to work.
Okay, I believe I had Ms. Ward next to speak.
I just wanted to say one thing in favor of grants. I think it's Northwest Elementary, isn't it, that, I can't think of its name, the principal out there has $1 million grant, and they're using
it.
it to walk and to run, and they've just had about 40 children out there run in a marathon or one of the
That's-
races that we run in the county.
That's what you
And they
need.
run every single afternoon, but it was because of a grant.
Well,
And the
that's what
money
he
he
can
got
use
to get
this
someone to
for.
supervise.
So
I'm not, I'm talking.
$25,000
I'm
Okay.
talking to Dr.
To run?
I'm talking to Dr. in favor of grants.
I wasn't aware of that, but
It's some grants.
I'm a
No, no,
taxpayer
but I'm-
too, so
I'm-
I
all
don't
I'm
want to
doing is
waste any
saying
money.
I support the fact that we do have to take one little bite of the whale at one time, and most of the time, when you attack an issue, it's a whale.
I've been chairman
through.
now. This is my last meeting as your chairman. I have never used this, but am I going to have to use it tonight?
I'll shut up, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner McGlaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Don't accuse me
I
anymore of
think,
controlling.
Dr. Morrow, I want to certainly thank you for initiating and going out to secure this grant. Anytime you can provide healthy initiatives for our children of Pitt County, I think it's a plus. in any form or fashion. And certainly, it's not costing the county any money, and so I'd like to make a motion that we receive this and that we support this grant.
Okay, we have a motion, do I have a second, have a second. Any further discussion? No, let's vote. Thank you, Dr. Morrow.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the next item is another item for decision. This is the acceptance of a North Carolina Governor's Crime Commission grant.
Move we approve it.
Okay, a motion
Second.
to approve, second.
Mr. Chairman,
Any-
there is a clarification on that, if you can allow the staff to make that just
Okay.
very briefly. Sheriff or Jean Guard or whoever you, there's a clarification on the numbers.
Withdraw my motion.
I withdraw my second.
And I'll be brief. The clarification was, we came before the board, the sheriff, Mrs. Larson, and myself, back in January of this year, for permission from the board to apply for a grant through the Governor's Crime Commission. And when we applied, we asked the board, and it was accepted for about $60,000 in match. We were able to find a funding priority through the Governor's Crime Commission that did not require that. There would be an adjustment now. We have received the grant pending approval from the board, but our request would be $50,794 less than we brought before you in early January of this year. So the adjustment would be for $9,206 over a 2-year period. This is to augment our domestic violence response with the Pitt County Sheriff's Office, and we just look for your support on this.
Renew my motion after
And I
that
renew my
remark.
second,
Okay.
and thank you very much for doing that.
Motion to accept and a second. Any further discussion? Let's vote. Thank you. The next item is a resolution declaring the result of the bond referendum held in Pitt County on November the 5th, and Mr. Holder is going to present that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this item is a procedural requirement as a result of the bond referendum, which was held on November the 5th. Included in your packet, beginning on page 136, you'll see the resolution that does require your adoption on this evening. On page 137, you have the statement of the results, and this has been as certified by the Pitt County Board of Elections, which showed that there were, at the time of the referendum, 114,331 registered voters in the county who were qualified to vote. At said referendum, 10,903 votes were cast against or in response to the order that you adopted in August authorizing the referendum. Of those 10,903 votes, we had 6,540 votes that were in support, and let's see, I guess.
I think it was 10 in support.
We had 10,903
I'm sorry,
that was for, and
10,000 were in
6,540
support,
that was
right, and
against.
6,000 against, that's right, 6,000.
Which was a total of 17,444 votes, which is 15.3%
Correct.
of our registered voters.
Mr. Chairman, a motion is in order, I think,
Yes,
to
yes.
accept the report of the vote as having passed the resolution, and that's what this does, right? Okay.
Actually adopting the
resolution.
resolution.
Adopt the resolution, yes.
But this does not necessarily officially move the project forward. That PCC would still need to come forward to make the official request.
Correct, this is a procedural requirement
Right.
as a part of the entire process.
Okay, have a motion, to have a second?
Second.
Got a second? Any further discussion? Let's vote. Thank you. The next item also is a follow-up from our last meeting, the Aden Grifton Yard Waste sites, and Mr. Demery is going to give us some additional information on that subject.
I'm here to
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I move that we follow the recommendations that has been presented to us pertaining to the Pitt County Solid Waste and Recycling Board, and that is found on page 143, and that we set that in motion to do.
I'll second that
the
motion.
recommendation.
Amen,
Second.
since you asked.
Any discussion?
That's the reason I'm doing it.
Now, Mr. James didn't have any discussion, so I don't think anybody else is gonna have any. Okay, so let's vote.
Thank you.
Thank you
Sorry,
very much.
gentlemen.
All right, now.
Okay, the next item is the reappointment to the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. There are 9 reappointments. They're listed on page 145. What's your pleasure? Motion to reappoint those, and a second. Any discussion? Let's vote. Thank you. Okay, we will now have commissioner comments. Commissioner Hammond, you have any comments?
No, sir. None.
No, sir.
I believe Mr. James wants to make some remarks about the email that went out from Farm Bureau about the tobacco, don't you, Mr. James?
No, I'm not familiar with that exactly, Mr. You go ahead and make it. Go ahead.
I didn't get one from the Farm Bureau, so I can't tell you. I thought you knew.
Well,
No,
this was
what-
the
what I'm
last
talking
year
a-
pertaining to the.
No, what I'm talking about, when we had the tobacco buyout, it was based out over a 10-year period.
Oh, yeah, but.
9 of the years have been paid, and now the administration, and it was tobacco company money that was paid for that, not taxpayers' money, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right.
Now the administrative office in Raleigh, as an administrative ruling, has said we're gonna take out 7.5%. So this year's final payment will be diminished by 7.5% unless you get your congressman to change it, Mr. James.
Yeah, let me kind of explain, since I've been picked on here. I collected my money ahead of time. Therefore, I did not get the letter that you're talking about.
No, you're gonna have to pay that rebate back.
They're not
They're
gonna
gonna
get.
take it away from you. That's what
I'll
they-
be quiet.
That's what they
Moving
said.
right
I felt like I could spend the money better if I had it than the government could spend it. That's the reason I did it. And I think I
Okay,
did too.
Commissioner Johnson, you have any comments?
No comment.
Commissioner McGlaughlin, Commissioner Webb? Do I have a motion?
I
that
move
we
for
adjourn?
adjournment. I've never
Motion,
done it
let's
before.
vote.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Lord.
Mr. James,
My
they
last
said in my
meeting, I was
letter that
over.
they